Welcome to American Medicine Today. I'm Kimberly Bonatti, joined by Ethan Euchre. Even amid the pandemic, controversy over vaccines has erupted around the globe, and a strong anti-vax movement has surfaced to oppose the vaccination of children. And much of this fraudulent information can be traced back to one specific man. Joining us now is Brian Deer, multi-award-winning investigative reporter and author of the new book, The Doctor Who Fooled the World: Science, Deception, and the War on Vaccines. Thank you for being with us, Brian.
Hello, Kimberly. Hello, Ethan.
Tell us about Dr. Andrew Wakefield. Who is this guy, and why and how did he become the doctor who fooled the world?
He was the person who really started off the modern anti-vaccine movement, or rejuvenated the modern anti-vaccine movement, with research which he published in London way back in 1998, that essentially was a made-up account to create the impression that there was a link between a common children's vaccine, the MMR vaccine, and autism. And he's really built on that today to bring forward really anxiety about all and any vaccine he can think of.
Now, your book spans 15 years. What made you want to write something that was so extensive and took so much effort?
I didn't spend the whole 15 years on that. I made television programs and I did other investigations. But what always brought me back to Wakefield was the way he responded in the first place, the discovery that Wakefield, in fact, been hired to make a case against the MMR vaccine by a firm of lawyers.
What was the actual motivation for these lawyers to hire Wakefield? I mean, other than the obvious, which is probably money, but what was the whole point of creating this anti-vax idea and movement?
They wanted to get a class action lawsuit going, and the problem they had was that there was no anxiety about the safety of the MMR vaccine in the UK. There'd been a bit of a worry earlier on. A couple of brands had been withdrawn over a technical issue involved with the mumps component, but there was no anxiety over the MMR vaccine. And so this lawyer had to find somebody who was critical of the vaccine. And this man, Wakefield, was critical of the vaccine because he tried earlier to get anxiety going, claiming that the MMR vaccine caused an inflammatory bowel disease. He was then moved over from bowel disease to autism. And they sat down and they thought, well, how can we create the impression, or in their words or their ideas, we find the evidence that the MMR vaccine is responsible for autism? And that's what they did.
We had one of the producers or one of the directors of that film, Vaxxed, the documentary, on our show. And I got to tell you, I was pretty convinced that a lot of the information, which apparently turned out to be false, was very convincing.
When you see a video or what people call documentaries quite often, you see something that exploits the trusted vocabulary of television. The anti-vaccine campaign has been very successful in the last few years in translating Andrew Wakefield's original claims in the UK, exporting them to the United States, packaging them up with sophisticated media products and selling them on to the public.
Well, and then getting celebrities involved, endorsing it like Robert De Niro.
Jenny McCarthy.
Now, Elle Macpherson, the supermodel, has become involved in it. Yes, that's right. The scare began in vaccines for children. If you have children who are appear to be developing normally and then show the first signs of some kind of developmental issue, such as autism, this is an issue which science doesn't have the answers for at the moment. Medical science can't answer all problems, cannot solve all medical conditions. But when somebody comes along and says, I can tell you what the cause is, it's vaccines, it's easy to be convinced. And I think that's one of the issues that the whole of humanity is going to have to grapple with in the next months and years as we see progress towards, we hope, a COVID-19 vaccine.
Why do you think nobody in the United States really took a look at what you exposed and showcased it here in our country?
There's all kinds of experts who will hold forth about vaccines. They'll say, oh, yes, they're completely safe, or they'll say, oh, no, I have concerns. And they'll give all kinds of highly generalized explanations or bits of medical technobabble that nobody really understands. But that challenge that I faced of finding out who the kids were in Wakefield's research and what was wrong with them, what wasn't wrong with them, is an enormously difficult task. And he kept suing me. And it was actually through his lawsuits that we were able to get to the bottom of what was really going on by the disclosure of information that went on there. That began to give me an opportunity to know really how this trick was pulled off.
One of his co-workers never disclosed the fact that he worked alongside him and was talking as, I guess, an independent source to kind of uphold his thought process that these inoculations did cause the problem.
That's right. There was a hearing in front of the United States Congress, the Committee on Oversight, where Andrew Wakefield turned up, and a business partner of his, a man named John O'Leary, an Irishman, turned up. And this man O'Leary, who was a scientist and who he claimed that he'd found independent endorsement using sophisticated molecular technologies, confirming Wakefield's claims. What he didn't say, or either of them say, was that they were business partners, they were planning on working together, and were there launching this campaign of theirs into the United States.
What does this mentality mean for the COVID vaccine when it does apparently come out? Because polls have shown here in the States that more than half, or around half, I want to say the last figures I saw, half of Americans have said, I'm skeptical about taking a COVID vaccine. What are your thoughts?
When people are questioned about vaccine, no matter how you put the question, they become more apprehensive about vaccine safety. Simply the act of asking the question creates anxiety. Over the years, this man Wakefield and people who marshal their troops, they've been able to create the activists who look after the websites and the Facebook pages and the YouTube channels. And they're the people who are day after day after day putting out these anti-vaccine messages, purporting to be often to be scientific and in terms that the ordinary person could never get to the bottom of it. And this is what has created so much energy and force behind the anti-vaccine movement, because it's had a long time to get itself into the position where it's ready to take on this COVID-19 issue.
Well, everything has been made political nowadays. I mean, you can't have an opinion about anything without people saying, well, you must be a lefty, you must be a racist Republican, at least over here in this country. I don't know how it is in England. I'm assuming it's probably not much different.
I just don't get involved in those kind of things. What I've just tried to do in my book, The Doctor Who Fooled the World, is to really just show how this thing happened in the traditions of old-fashioned newspaper investigations, just to gather the documents, gather the evidence, and construct the history of how this thing unfolded. And while I say I don't tell people whether to vaccinate or whether to vaccinate members of their family or not, I think anybody reading the story that I've told would be able to come to certain conclusions about whether they should allow people like Andrew Wakefield and Robert Kennedy to help them weigh up their decisions over a COVID-19 vaccine with these men's thumb on the scale.
And where can people find your book?
They can find The Doctor Who Fooled the World on Amazon or any good bookshop, Barnes & Noble and the others.
Well, thank you, Brian Deere, for being on the show and shedding a spotlight on this controversy. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Pleasure. Nice to be with you.